So we've explored many different Kubernetes-related features. Let's do a typical debugging journey. We can see here that we have high pod container CPU alarms firing for multiple different applications. These are the grouping fields we can see. So the front-end application, the recommendation service, the currency service, the product catalog service. I've acknowledged this issue and it's assigned to me, so I'm going to explore this one. We can see that the currency service is triggering, so when we open it up and watch the data, whoa, we can see a big increase in the CPU utilization there. That's of interest. So what do? We want to make sure that first and foremost, what's the impact of this high CPU utilization? And for that, APM is great. So we go to the APM service catalog and we can see the currency service. When we open up the currency service, we can begin to explore various different pieces of information related to that application. So for example, we can see the average latency, the throughput, and so on. So there are a few things that immediately jump out to me when I go to the screen. One is there isn't a spike in errors. So right now we probably don't have a degradation in service yet, but a high CPU followed by an increase in latency, we can see the direction of travel. We can also see the SLOs are being breached around latency, and we can see the latency has increased here. So there's a bit of a variance here. P95 is 1.69 milliseconds, P75 is 470 microseconds, very, very fast. But P99 is 7 milliseconds, still fast, but for this service that might be a problem. We can also see that upstream services have breached some SLOs as well, so there may be a ripple effect from what's going on here. And if we look at our SLOs, indeed we can see that we've breached many latency-related SLOs here, so that's a bit of a problem. You can view a bunch of different things here. So for example, our sort of application metrics and Kubernetes metrics, if it's available. You can open up the logs here for the application. In fact, we're going to explore some of the logs now and see if we can find anything interesting in there. One of the really powerful things we've done is we can set up a custom action. So we can see a Kubernetes host name here. Okay, so we see a spike in CPU and a spike in latency. What's actually happening in our cluster? We've set up a custom action. So now we've seen this host, we can just open up the Kubernetes monitoring dashboard, and automatically we can see everything that's going on that particular host. So that's really interesting. Now we can see all the different pods, CPU utilizations, and we can see that there's a bunch of them that are actually approaching really close to 100 there. And right at the top there is our currency service that's still riding quite high. We can see memory utilization, we can see network in, network out, Kubernetes events as well. So what we're exploring here and what we're looking into is the various different ways that you can tackle this problem. And you can even take a more cluster-wide view and say, okay, is something going weird with my cluster in general? And of course, top CPU-intensive applications, currency service right there. We could have arrived at this problem from so many different directions, but we had an alarm that we investigated using APM. We checked the logs, and now we can take a look. And that alarm was triggered by metrics, by the way. We've checked the logs, and we can even explore the traces as well. So if we open up our traces here, we've checked the APM. It's really, really cool. Everything's looking interesting. We can zoom in on the currency service, and we can say, okay, show me those 99th percentile, because you remember we saw those spikes. And we can see here that we have this convert request. Let's just see what that looks like and see if anything weird is going on there. So what we can do, remember, we didn't see a spike in alarm, so we don't have to explore an alarm thing. We can see in one flow here, we have a disjointed kind of flow over here, and we have a really complex flow going on. If we open up resources here, we can actually look at the pod metrics, the CPU metrics, all related to the time of the span. So we can see here that we've got a lot of stuff going on, multiple different requests, and a maximum request of 8 milliseconds. This is a long one in comparison to the rest of the currency services. So there we go. That's just a really simple way of moving around the Coralogix application so that you're viewing the different services in lots of different angles so that you can really, really understand in depth what's actually happening in your system and not looking through a single lens, but looking from multiple different places to get the true picture of what's happening in your Kubernetes cluster.